Starbase has been throwing out surprises faster than we can keep up, and this week feels like a turning point. There are huge shifts happening on the ground and hardware racing ahead. What about Jared? Yep, he is now in, and wow, there is a big plan here for the moon. We've got a Starlink situation raising eyebrows after an anomaly with one of those released, and have we really lost the MAVEN spacecraft at Mars? This one is absolutely packed, so let's get straight into it.
Okay, Niall, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Hey, Marcus House with you here, and if you were with us last week while we were talking about Pad 1, you might recall that we saw SpaceX ripping out the water-cooled steel plate that was used to protect the pad from the insane heat and pressure of those 33 mighty Raptor engines. Removal of this was well underway, and as you can see thanks to RGV aerial photography, they have almost entirely got rid of it. At the time this was taken, there was just a couple of pieces in the middle and on the side. The next challenge is digging down and excavating the shape of the trench while having to deal with all of the rebar and central piles that they have underneath the surface. The old deluge farm has had all three larger water storage tanks removed. On Monday they had begun to hook the crane to the first tank. After about an hour of making sure the straps were fully connected, they lifted that out and straight over onto its transport trailer that was soon heading over to the port of Brownsville overnight. In the next few days we watched the same process for the second and third tanks, both of which also rolled away from the launch site just after midnight. Another tank was also removed, which you may recall was a storage tank that supplied the booster's fire suppression system with carbon dioxide. Alongside the deluge tank removals, we can also see the open space now where they recently removed the methane tanks which were used to reclaim methane that was in use by the system. The tower arm cable, which was previously laid across the ground right behind the tower, has had some maintenance or modification work done. This has now been reinstalled on the tower. Moving over to the new Pad 2, we had watched SpaceX remove both of the actuators from the tower arms, which came as a surprise to everyone considering that we had expected this system was new and relatively operational already. Well, this week it became clearer that there was much more deeper modifications going on. The arm pieces that we saw delivered last week were offloaded over here beside the trench walls. We're still trying to find out exactly what they're up to here. Maybe they want to install larger actuators, or maybe they've discovered an issue requiring an upgrade after going through the testing process earlier this year. If an issue was found back then, it was going to take some time to find a solution, prepare new hardware and send it in. A silver lining to Booster 18's mishap here may be that it gave SpaceX a little extra time to implement these changes now rather than later. Anyway, this should all begin to make more sense as we see more hardware rising back up over the coming weeks. Along with that, it is also worth pointing out that the workers removed 4 old control boxes on the carriage and replaced them with a set of 5 here just recently, so this was another sign that they seem to be increasing the capability of this system. Over the road, the air separation site has been screaming along since we last dived into it. Shaun has been out there keeping his eye on the new pieces arriving. From above, we could see tons of new compressor equipment staged on the concrete pad for installation, and we have 2 of these blue monster 3-phase induction motors that will be used to power the compressor equipment on these pedestals. In fact, work has already started getting formwork and a rebar foundation laid out across the piles that they dug in here previously. They will form the concrete pile cap that will support all of the heavy liquefaction and purification equipment. For weeks now, the build site has been full of excitement as the new Starship vehicles make quick progress. We left you last week having just watched the liquid oxygen side tank for the new version 3 Booster 19 rolling in. We have a neat view of that from above right next to the bay entrance here at the time of the flyover. Next, for this Super Heavy, we expected to see the last aft section of the main liquid oxygen tank to roll in, and that is exactly what they did here on Saturday morning. This super complex segment that will eventually have 33 Raptor 3 engines installed exited the Star Factory and rolled right into the Mega Bay. As you can see, this is already set up with most of its external lines, but it is just a little less complete than Booster 18's was when that first rolled out. This one was missing hardware in the strake areas here, but that could simply be related to an ongoing Booster 18 investigation. Just as a side note there, we still haven't had a definitive answer to what caused that gigantic pop, so it is still assumed to be a COPV related issue. Anyway, any of this can be outfitted in the bay at any point, so there was no need to delay having this final section stacked. So, with all the sections from the aft right up to the top of the oxygen tank together, SpaceX can move all of this to a different stand and then begin stacking the shorter liquid methane tank section next. Well, they didn't waste any time because on Tuesday night they rolled out the first section of the methane tank. This barrel is the middle of the three. That was followed a few days later by the forward section, already equipped with the integrated hot stage truss, looking very impressive. Now that just leaves the one last section of the methane tank, which should be coming any moment now, probably before this video is even live with how fast this is moving. If the progress is anything like we've seen so far, it shouldn't be long until we see Booster 19 fully stacked. In Mega Bay 2, the first version 3 ship number 39 moved off the middle stand over to one of the left stands temporarily while workers rolled out and lifted its raceways into the middle work stand. The second one we got to see even closer thanks to Lab Padre's camera crew. The SpaceX team carefully hooked it into place and then detached from the lifting jib. It's a great chance to check out all the many different sensors, pipes and wires before they've installed and covered this with shielding. All those critical lines run right from the aft all the way up to the payload bay, as shown nicely in this awesome 3D printed model by Space Rocket Lab. As we watch the new version 3 ship being constructed, we are getting a much clearer picture on the many alterations between the version 2 ship. Link to this is in the description if you want to check that out in more detail. Anyway, Ship 39 was seen back on the middle stand a few days later so that the installation could take place. Now what followed next was like watching musical chairs tracking the movement of all of these COPVs inside the red protective covering. Yes, it appears that SpaceX is not taking any chances at all with this ship, and they seem to be replacing the full set of them installed in the nose cone with new ones. A speculative thought is perhaps this is related to the demise of Booster 18, but we don't know for sure. It could be related to any number of other issues. It is getting more difficult to see through the growing complexity of the massive gigabay in front, of course. From above, we can see that the 6 openings on the east side facing the Star Factory are now at full height, and the horizontal joints at the backside are for walkways, just like we've seen here in this shot by Greg Scott at the Gigabay in Florida. The back doors look to be about half a level shorter than those on the east side. Now, we have seen a bunch of additional tower crane sections delivered in sets of 2. These were being stored here as we see looking down the transfer aisle and were to allow the cranes to climb up further and begin that third level. Now that the framework on the second level is nearly complete, that process had already started on Friday afternoon. Shaun has been loving watching the progress week in, week out, and thanks to all you amazing subscribers, we get to be here to do this, so we can't thank you enough. The Gigabay is going to be absolutely gigantic once completed. Now, there is some interesting work to watch in the Sanchez area of the site. The end piece of the ship quick disconnect arm is a critical component for the operational status for Pad 2, and now we can see that they have lifted and installed a large grey section equipped with walkways. With that, you may notice this spot at the end, which is for the ship interface to sit in so that it can be raised up and down. Well, neat, because the crew have been swarming all over it since they started installing the quick disconnect interface at the start of the week. Along with that, all of the pieces for the first of its kind next generation ship transport stand have been welded together, and it was moved just down the road to have the clamps installed. With that spot now free, SpaceX has already started to get the second ship transport stand together. The booster stand over here is still getting its upgrades to support next generation boosters as well, of course, and that looks to have had all of its arms now integrated. Taking a look over at the rocket garden, we now have a great view both of the version 2 Booster 17 aft section on the right and the version 3 aft from Booster 18 on the left. Before jumping into that though, thank you to Surfshark VPN sponsoring this video. I'm sure that the vast majority of people agree that the internet should be open and accessible, but more and more, it's full of frustrating virtual walls blocking your passage. You try to read some news from outside the country and it's blocked. Want to catch up on a home game while you're on holiday or just some news video on YouTube? Nope, that's not available in your country either. That's where Surfshark VPN steps in to instantly solve these problems. Once installed, you just choose a country that you want to appear to be browsing from, hit refresh, and that's it, you're in. It's super useful for staying informed, streaming freely, or just browsing without limits like the internet was meant to be. Along with being a terrific way to break through all those barriers, Surfshark is also a solid privacy tool. It encrypts everything that you do online, even stuff that normally doesn't get encrypted, so it's way harder for anybody, including your internet provider, to peer in on your activity. Also, if you do a lot of travelling and you find yourself using public Wi-Fi at airports or cafes, it's kind of essential really. It keeps your data safe from anyone trying to steal your information through any number of nefarious ways. After all, there's no shortage of news out there about hackers setting up fake Wi-Fi networks claiming to be run by a hotel or airport. What about another benefit to all this? Well, pricing tricks are very common. A number of sites will literally show you a different price on stuff depending on where you are. With Surfshark, you can hop between countries to see if you're getting a reasonable price and perhaps even find a better deal. Just one subscription covers all your devices at no extra cost, so you can have it on your phone, tablet, PC, and any other supported device. They even give you a 30-day money-back guarantee so that you can feel safe to give it a try. So check it out by heading to surfshark.com/Marcus or use the code Marcus at checkout to get 4 extra months for free. You can also scan the QR code right there on screen. Thank you, Surfshark. So yes, getting back to the rocket garden, seeing both the version 2 booster 17 aft section on the right and the version 3 aft from booster 18 on the left is pretty awesome. Fantastic detail there thanks to RGV. If you missed it last week, go check this out. We dove right into all of the neat complexity of the version 3. Of course, to go with all that over here, we have Booster 18's forward section with the hot stage truss still attached. That's just sitting in the scrapyard beside Booster 17's common dome, and for the moment, it doesn't look like they want to reuse any part of it, so I suspect they will just sit it here until SpaceX decides to finally scrap it. Now, some interesting steel trusses have been constructed here too, and at first, I thought that this was likely to do with the Gigabay. However, plot twist we think, instead, these look like they may well be part of the ship static fire station at Massey's. Well, let's head right down Highway 4 and explore the test site because there's a bunch to cover here. See these steel truss sections here? Yes, they look very similar to the ones that we just looked at Sanchez, and if we look over at the static fire station, we can see the addition of some new gusset plates. These have been welded to the legs that the static fire stand is bolted to, just like those on the trusses. Chrome Kiwi took the time to make this awesome graphic showing how all the various pieces that we've seen scattered all around SpaceX's sites may fit together. At this point in time, you've really got to use your imagination to see what it could be used for, but inspecting the hardware around the front of the ship, it could be something to do with testing the docking adapters, or perhaps allow access to a hatch like we've seen on the human landing system and various Starship renders. It's an interesting puzzle right now, so do let me know below if you have any ideas on any of this. Something else interesting to note is the mountain of HESCO barriers over here. These are typically used in areas where you want a temporary but rigid wall that can be easily removed at a later date. This setup seems similar to the old burst pad that SpaceX used to have in this area. You may recall the Flight Termination System test article shortly after Flight 1, where they validated their new explosive charges by filling it with water and simply detonating it. We know there are pipes buried underneath these barriers, and they seem to tap off to the liquid nitrogen side of the Deluge farm, so that could mean SpaceX intends to do more testing in this area. Along with that, the methane tank farm now has the blast wall poured right to the end now, and the formwork should be ready to come off here soon. Great timing because the methane farm was recently seen coming to life, so yeah, hopefully all should be ready soon for the first version 3 ship, Static Fire. Now, looking over here, the cleanup after Booster 18's destruction is making this seem like an almost distant memory. Pieces of the chines that were removed from the cut-up sections with the COPVs still present inside are right here, and they are likely keeping these for further investigation. We can see the Booster cryo stand is now free as well, and from the outside it doesn't look to be too damaged, so fingers crossed any issues are an easy fix. At this point it seems that they will be able to roll Booster 19 out here as soon as that is ready for its test campaign. There will be no hiccups this time. 2026 is going to be a much more streamlined year. I can feel it. Now on Tuesday, the crane here rolled over beside the 39.1 test tank and was hooked up to a load spreader, then swiftly removed a day later. This test article, as far as we've seen, has only performed 4 cryogenic tests, so it'll be interesting to see if this returns to do more at some point, perhaps even after starting on Ship 39 testing. Later in the week, the thrust simulator rig was rolled back to the build site, so with those COPVs swapped on this ship, perhaps we will see that rolling here shortly. Looking at the road closure here, I think we'll be seeing this over the weekend. Before moving on, the other booster aft structure test article at Massey's is still continuing, and on Thursday it went through test number 12, so they are pushing that one like crazy to find any possible point of failure, it seems. We have big news for the week for Jared Isaacman finally officially becoming NASA's new administrator. After months of uncertainty, on Thursday, Jared's photo went up on the wall and signed was a new executive order titled Ensuring American Space Superiority. Do give all this a read when you have a moment, but the key items here in my mind was the goal to put humans on the moon by 2028, establish a lunar base by 2030, also install a nuclear reactor at that base for power, and then help set up a commercial successor to the International Space Station. I think with all that, they better get started. Anyway, congratulations to Jared. It is certainly going to be an interesting ride to see if they can make some big strides towards all these goals. Jared, of course, doesn't need the salary, so in addition to his existing charitable efforts, he is donating all of that salary to the US Space and Rocket Center's Space Camp, saying that we need to help prepare the pioneers of tomorrow. We all think that is pretty incredible. Big milestones again for Falcon 9 with another busy week. On Saturday evening, almost a week ago, the first for the week was hidden in the fog as SpaceX counted down the final seconds to liftoff of the Starlink Group 1512 mission. The view at Vandenberg Space Force Base turned to bright white before the onboard cameras started to show us the first actual view of this mission. Booster 1093 here was on its 9th flight as it sent 27 satellites on board on their way. Of course, I Still Love You was out there for the touchdown. Next, the Group 682 flight was away from Space Launch Complex 40 right after midnight on Monday. A beautiful clear night launch compared to the previous, and it was Booster 1092 also on its 9th flight. So we had Booster 1092 and 1093 within a few days of each other, rocketing away with the same number of flights. The maximum payload of 29 Starlinks placed on board, and a shortfall of gravitas waiting by for this one. Interestingly, we had this post from the VP of Starlink Engineering, Michael Nichols, obviously frustrated about a near miss. It seems 9 satellites were deployed after launching from northwestern China, and they had seemingly not correctly coordinated with the existing satellites operating in space. That resulted in a 200-meter or 656-foot close approach between one of the deployed satellites and a Starlink satellite at a 560-kilometer altitude. Michael explained here that most of the risk in space operations is a lack of coordination between satellite operators, which needs to change quickly with more and more satellites being placed into low Earth orbit. This thankfully resulted in CAS Space looking into the issue and saying that they would coordinate with satellite operators, also calling for re-establishing better communications. Michael seemed thankful of that response, so indeed, let's hope that we see all these agencies globally recognising how important these systems are. 2 more rapid-fire missions for the week. Wednesday morning, Group 699 was off from Pad 39A with another 29 in the stack. It was landing number 6 for Booster 1094 there on Just Read the Instructions. Now, under 2 hours later, across the country, there was the final one from Vandenberg Space Force Base, Group 1513 on top of Booster 1063, which was flying for its massive 30th flight. Of course, I Still Love You was out there as the landing platform for this one. Now, sadly, one of the satellites satellites numbered 35956 experienced an anomaly, and they lost communication with it at an altitude of 418 kilometers. Because this one is so low still, it'll burn up in the atmosphere within a couple of weeks, but this is a bizarre issue. The strange part is that the satellite was venting propellant from the tank, which led to a rapid decay of its orbit. According to Starlink, they had observed a number of low relative velocity objects, so something has obviously popped there in a fairly dramatic way. Now, there is only one more Falcon 9 scheduled before the end of this year, and that is because at Pad 39A, the team is focusing on preparing for Falcon Heavy launches, and there is also a huge push sending a load of the SpaceX crew to help ramp up Starship progress from the Cape sites, so exciting times. A number of neat updates from Blue Origin this week. What we are watching here is the BE-7 engine destined for the Blue Moon Mark 1 lunar lander. This here was the acceptance testing run being completed, and it's kind of neat seeing the team had signed the nozzle there. They were doing a 290-second test and then repeated this again to make sure that they had exposed the engine to the full range of thrust and mixture ratios to verify the performance worked exactly as expected. With that, it was given the green tick to be sent off to Florida to be installed on the lander. I can't wait to see this beast fly. They also have another second stage ready for a mission, posting this video of a 15-second hot fire. This is the fourth in the series now, so they are quite rapidly picking up the pace for the production line making these. Of course, the third New Glenn second stage will be launching with the Blue Moon Pathfinder mission, but this fourth second stage should have the NRO Responsive Space mission on board, which will be carrying Firefly's Elytra orbital transfer vehicle and other gear. After that, I believe Launch 5 might finally be an Amazon Leo launch around mid-next year. Speaking of Amazon Leo, and remember, this was formerly known as Project Kuiper just to avoid confusion, the next was away on Atlas V just before 3:30 AM on Tuesday morning. Space Launch Complex 41 lit right up as this beast in its most powerful 551 configuration rocketed away. The 5 SRBs separated around the 1 minute and 50-second mark, and the main stage separation around the 4.5 minute point. I always love seeing that RL-10 firing up, the exhaust pretty much invisible, and the only hint that you really get there is the first stage booster lighting up well behind. That was where the stream closed off, leaving the Amazon Leo satellites to deploy later. Even Rocket Lab had a ridiculously crazy week. On Sunday for the Raise and Shine mission, Electron carried the NeonSat 1A Earth observation satellite to orbit from New Zealand. Minutes after midnight on Thursday, another Electron was away from Wallops Island in Virginia with the Don't Be Such a Square mission. This was also Rocket Lab's 20th flight of the year. The US Space Force STP-S30 mission here had 4 experimental satellite buses known as DiskSats. They deployed into a 550-kilometre orbit about an hour after liftoff, and these spacecraft have been made to test new satellite designs and operations, including sustained flight in a very low Earth orbit where atmospheric drag becomes a serious challenge. Indeed, they have had a busy week, and with that, the progress on Neutron is also going great. They've recently released these cool views of the rocket's fairings, lovingly named Hungry Hippo. They've successfully completed the qualification testing for these, and they are essentially ready to fly. Now, Starfish Space gave us all a bit of a surprise this week as they announced the secretive Remora mission that they have been working on along with Impulse Space. Apparently, Impulse Space's Leo Express 2 spacecraft, which was launched on the Transporter 12 mission earlier this year in January, was carrying some payloads and software by Starfish Space. This was never officially made public until now, and what is especially interesting is that they used just a single camera with Starfish's navigation and control software and were able to move the vehicle right in toward the Leo Express 1 spacecraft. The two vehicles were within 1.25 kilometers of each other, which makes this a very successful test. Tracking objects in orbit is difficult because you need super precise navigation and control, and in this case, it is all being done autonomously. Along with that, Starfish Space, you may recall, launched their Otter Pup 2 mission back in June on the Transporter 14 mission. This tiny spacecraft will not only perform a close rendezvous, but also attempt to dock with a deorbit ion satellite. If they pull that unprecedented mission off, it'll be the first commercial satellite docking ever, and it'll help pave the way for satellite servicing missions. NASA and the US Space Force are very keen to see such a commercial industry take off. In fact, they are hoping to launch 2 Otter missions for Intelsat and the US Space Force next year. They will be heading into a geostationary orbit. Now, you may have seen recently that NASA had lost contact with the MAVEN spacecraft orbiting Mars. Well, on Monday we had a fresh update on this situation, and it is certainly not looking good. MAVEN has been out of direct communication since December the 4th. Often with such things we find that a communication issue is a temporary thing and they will end up re-establishing contact, but as time has passed by it is looking very unlikely at this point. NASA lost contact as it passed behind Mars, and when MAVEN was expected to re-emerge, they couldn't detect the signal with a deep space network. The researchers did recover a brief fragment of tracking data from December the 6th, and this suggested that the MAVEN spacecraft was rotating in an unexpected manner. The team is obviously continuing to investigate this anomaly, but for the moment, one of NASA's most important Mars assets has essentially fallen silent. The potential loss of MAVEN is obviously heartbreaking for the team that has invested so much time within this project, but there are many other implications to this. MAVEN was a key asset which was helping to operate NASA's Perseverance and Curiosity rovers. To help with this current problem for the next few weeks of surface operations, NASA is planning additional passes from the remaining orbiters, so there's a lot of impact with the teams running all these projects. MAVEN, of course, has been a huge success over the years. It first arrived in 2014 and has since then helped revolutionise our understanding of the Mars atmosphere. It has helped to explain how the solar wind has stripped most of this away, leaving the once comparatively warm, wet world to become the frozen desert that we see today. Even if this is the end for MAVEN, it has been an incredibly amazing mission. After all, it started its 1 Earth year scientific primary mission in 2014, and here we are well over a decade later potentially saying goodbye to it. Fingers crossed that they manage to gather some more data from it, but time is certainly running out. So there we have it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe so we get to keep making them. Christmas is of course just around the corner for all those that celebrate it like we do. So yeah, have an incredible week. If you can spare some more time, check out this video here next to help us out even further. I'd love to know what you think of all the work that the team put into all of this magic. Thanks for watching all this way through too, of course. I will see you all in the next video.